Pregnancy and motherhood are something many women see as a great joy in their lives, one many aspire to achieve. However, one mother's joy was soured as her mind slowly deteriorated, culminating in a terrible tragedy so few thought would ever happen. All this and more as we explore the anatomy of murder. June 20th, 2001, shortly after her husband, Rusty Yates, left for work at around 9 a.m., 37-year-old mother of 5, Andrea Yates, drew a bath in her Clear Lake, Texas home. Her mother-in-law, Dora Yates, was scheduled to arrive at the home around 10 a.m. after Rusty had left. But in that hour, the unthinkable happened.
What's your name? Dora Yates. What's the problem? Is your husband there? No. So what's the problem? I need him to come. I need to know why we're coming, ma'am. Is he there standing next to you? She? Are you having disturbance? Are you ill or what? Yes, I'm ill. You need an ambulance? No, I need a police officer. Send an ambulance.
Police arrived to find a disturbing scene. Her 5 children, 7-year-old Noah, 5-year-old John, 3-year-old Paul, 2-year-old Luke, and 6-month-old daughter Mary were dead. Each child was laid out on her bed, her infant daughter Mary in her son John's arms, and their bodies were covered by a sheet. The only exception was that of her oldest son Noah, whom she left floating in the bathtub before calling emergency services. She followed this up with a call to her husband, telling him to come home. Of all people who would commit such a terrible act, Andrea Yates was the last person anyone suspected of harming her children. Born Andrea Kennedy on July 2, 1964 in Hallsville, Texas, to a German mother and Irish-American father, Andrea was the youngest of 5 children and raised in a loving home. She was an extremely bright student, a member of the National Honor Society, captain of her high school swim team, and graduated as her class's valedictorian. She attended a pre-nursing program at the University of Houston from 1982 to 1984, before graduating from the University of Texas School of Nursing in 1986 with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. 3 years later, she met NASA computer engineer Russell Yates, known as Rusty, in her apartment complex. The relationship moved quickly, as they moved in together shortly after meeting and then married in 1993. The couple announced they would seek to have as many babies as nature allowed, giving birth to their first child, Noah, on February 26th the next year. Andrea gave up her career as a nurse to become a full-time mother. Second son, John, followed on December 15, 1995, and third son, Paul, on September 13, 1997. Rusty, a devout Christian, followed the teachings of a non-denominational Christian missionary named Michael Warnecki, whom Rusty met while attending Auburn University. After beginning to date Andrea, who was raised as a Catholic, he introduced her to Michael's teachings, which emphasized subservient wives and repenting one's sins in fear of God's wrath. Andrea seemed to embrace the teachings and took them to heart. The family eventually lived a minimalistic lifestyle out of a trailer, moving to Florida for a brief period when Rusty accepted employment there. Upon moving back to Houston in 1997, this transitioned into living in a motorhome. Signs of Andrea's mental health decline began shortly after the birth of their 4th son, Luke, on February 15, 1999. Andrea, who in her late teens and early adulthood suffered from bulimia nervosa and depression, began showing signs of suicidal ideation and depression. culminating in a suicide attempt by overdosing on June 17, 1999. She was hospitalized for this and prescribed antidepressants, but within a day was admitted to another hospital after threatening to slit her throat with a knife. This time, she was prescribed a variety of medications, including the antipsychotic Haldol, which seemed to improve her condition, along with the fact that the family moved into an actual house. However, the stabilization was limited, as Andrea suffered a nervous breakdown a month later, after attempting suicide twice more, forcing her to be hospitalized each time. She was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis and major depressive disorder with psychotic features on different occasions, though she and her husband both considered her mental illness to be a pregnancy-related issue. She was referred to Dr. Eileen Starbranch, who advised the couple against having more children to prevent further psychosis. The couple disregarded this advice, choosing to conceive again due to their religious beliefs. Andrea, in therapy, spoke of feeling as though she lost her identity by becoming a stay-at-home mother and housewife, and that Rusty's beliefs and high expectations of her and their children, in addition to her own, weighed heavily on her mind. She felt an enormous pressure to raise perfect children and be the perfect mother, something she had convinced herself that she was not, and she felt trapped in her own life. Andrea chose to cease therapy and medical treatment in late 1999, and soon after became pregnant with her fifth child, giving birth to their first daughter, Mary, on November 30th, 2000. Andrea coped well for several months, and then her father Andrew fell ill and died on March 12, 2001. This sent her into overdrive. She became extremely depressed and paranoid, unable to eat or sleep, and she stopped nursing her daughter. Assessed and admitted for evaluation in April of 2001, Andrea was unresponsive, refusing food and liquids, pulled out portions of her hair, and began showing signs of delusional thinking and hallucinations, but denied having psychosis or thinking of harming her children. After a brief hospitalization, she was placed back onto a medical regimen and discharged under the care of Dr. Mohammed Saeed, who chose to reinstate her previous medications with adjustments, diagnosing her with postpartum depression. However, it soon became clear Andrea was not improving, remaining lethargic, depressed, and having suicidal thoughts. It was around this time that Andrea began having fears and thoughts that she may harm her children, resulting in a catatonic episode on May 3rd, where she drew a bath in the middle of the day. Suspecting this may have been a suicide attempt, she was hospitalized for a fifth time for a week, then released due to insurance issues. Andrea and Rusty both reportedly told Dr. Saeed of improvement, resulting in the reduction and discontinuation of Haldol in her regimen. In the month leading up to the murders, Andrea experienced delusions of Satan being in her home and tormenting thoughts that she was a terrible mother. She additionally believed that a child protection agency and her former psychiatrist placed cameras in her home and believed she was seeing connections in television shows and movies. Despite experiencing terrifying visions and hearing voices, she disclosed this to no one. Friends and family noted her wandering aimlessly around the house, unable to communicate or show emotion, often holding her daughter as her sons acted out from a lack of attention. Rusty Yates was advised by Dr. Saeed to not leave Andrea alone, as she was unable of caring for herself or her children. However, Rusty was convinced otherwise and wanted to increase her independence. He began leaving her alone for increasing periods of time. His mother, Dora, was often at the home to assist Andrea. However, Dora once regarded Andrea as lazy and seemed to be of little help to her daughter-in-law. On the morning of the murders, Andrea fed her children and waited for her husband to leave to start the water. One by one, she brought each of her children into the bathroom and held them under the bathwater until they were dead. Her oldest son, Noah, attempted to run away from her after witnessing Mary floating in the tub, but she eventually drowned him as well. Andrea was arrested shortly after police arrived. Upon being interviewed by police, she confessed to the murders of her children. She stated she was convinced that she was a terrible mother, unable to raise them correctly, and thus they would not go to heaven upon death. She believed Satan tainted her children, making them sinful and disobedient, that they were not developing appropriately, and that killing them was the only way to lead to righteousness and salvation. She expressed remorse for her actions, but genuinely believed she did the right thing to save her children. The Yates children were laid to rest on June 27, 2001, at Forest Park East Cemetery. Between her arrest and trial, she was kept in isolation and was watched closely for suicidal behavior. Several doctors noted psychotic and delusional behavior that improved upon being administered Haldol and other medications. During her first trial in 2002, the focus was establishing whether Andrea Yates was psychotic, severely mentally ill, and incapable of knowing right and wrong while committing the murders, a legal test known as the McNaughton Rules. The prosecution argued Andrea was not insane at the time of the murders and was capable of distinguishing right from wrong. The defense argued that she was indeed psychotic at the time of the crime. Nonetheless, the jury rejected her insanity defense, and she was found guilty of 2 counts of capital murder. Prosecutors sought the death penalty, but she was sentenced to life in prison. 3 years later, in January of 2005, the Court of Appeals reversed her conviction when an admission of false testimony by expert witness and psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz came to light. Dr. Dietz stated during his testimony that Andrea, an avid viewer of the crime television series Law & Order, was possibly influenced by an episode involving a mother who drowned her children and was declared insane when no such episode actually existed at all. Andrea was granted a new trial a year later, entering a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. She was released on bail the next month on the condition that she admit herself to a mental health treatment facility. 6 months later, on July 26, 2006, after 3 days' deliberation, Andrea was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was committed to North Texas State Hospital. She is now housed in a low-security mental hospital in Kerrville, Texas. Rusty and Andrea divorced in 2004, though Rusty maintains his support of Andrea. He has since remarried and has a son. YouTube is demonetizing my content for being too graphic and doesn't want any brands to have advertisements on my videos, so most of my videos will no longer have ads on them. If you'd like to keep my content on YouTube, please consider pledging to my Patreon. You'll be given exclusive access to special content there, as well as guarantee that my content will stay on YouTube long term. You can go to patreon.com/RobDyke or press the link in the description below to help keep YouTube creepy. Thanks for listening. Now be sure to check out another one of my videos, and of course, be sure to subscribe to my channel now because you won't want to miss what's next. And I'll see you next time.